Mark lived alone in a small wooden house, near the edge of the forest. The wind always blew hard at night, and the trees made strange sounds, but that never scared him. He had lived there for 5 years. He was used to it. He liked the quiet, the peace, and the long space away from people. But then the noise started. It came one night from under the floor, near the kitchen, soft and slow at first, like tiny feet moving across wood, he thought. It was just rats. He grabbed a flashlight and checked, but saw nothing. The next night, it came again, louder and closer this time. It was not just scratching, there was also a tapping sound, slow and steady, like someone trying to catch. Mark stood in the dark with the lights off. He held his breath and listened. He placed his ear close to the floor. The sound was right under him, not in the walls, not in the attic, but down below, inside the floor itself. He knocked 3 times with his knuckles on the wooden panel, and the floor knocked back. That made his heart stop. He jumped up and turned on all the lights. He grabbed his crowbar from the tool rack. He knew his house well. He had built most of it by hand, but he never saw a hatch or a crawl space before he moved the table and felt along the floor, looking for anything that felt different. After a few minutes, he found a square part of the floor that made a hollow sound when he tapped. He placed the crowbar into the edge and pulled the wooden panel up. It was heavier than it looked. Under it, he saw a strange metal surface, cold and dark, a circular hatch with a handle. It was not part of the house design. It looked like something out of a ship or bunker, old but strong and sealed tight. Mark sat beside it, staring, not knowing what to do. He should call someone, maybe the police or a builder, but he did not. He felt something strange inside his chest. Not fear, not yet, something more like a pull, like the hatch was calling him. He turned the handle. It did not move at first. He pushed with both hands. It gave a little. He took a deep breath and turned again, and this time, the handle spun slowly, and the hatch opened with a hiss. Cold air touched his face, like something had been locked inside for a long time. He shined his flashlight into the hole, but saw only stairs going down. The metal walls were covered with dust and wires, and strange symbols, not from any language he knew. The air smelled sharp and dry, like something electric had burned long ago. He stepped down one stair, then another. The light flickered but stayed on. He counted 10 steps before reaching a narrow hallway. At the end of the hallway was a door, or maybe a wall with a smooth black surface. His flashlight bounced off it like glass. Then he heard it again, the scratching, but now it was behind the black wall, not under the floor. He walked slowly toward the sound, then stopped. He heard something else, a whisper, a word soft and broken, and it sounded like his name. Mark froze. Every hair on his arm stood up. He looked around. No one was there. No one should even know his name down here. He felt the metal door with his hand. It was warm, like it had just come alive. The scratching stopped. Silence filled the room. Then a sharp knock came from the other side. 3 knocks, slow and clear. He stepped back, holding his flashlight like a weapon. His breath shook. He did not understand any of this. There were no stories of secret labs near here, no rumors of old bunkers or war tunnels. This was his home, and now it felt like a trap. The door made a low hum, and a small light turned on near its center, red at first, then green. Then the whole door split down the middle and started to open. Just a few inches, not fast, not loud, just slow, like it was waking up. Mark held his breath and waited. What came out next would not be a rat, and he knew that now whatever was behind that door had been waiting, had been listening, and it knew his name. Air grew colder. The light inside the room flickered again, and a shape moved behind the door. Not large, not heavy, something about the size of a person, but not walking. More like crawling, sliding, like it had never learned to walk. Like Usta. Door opened fully, and the thing inside stepped into the light. It was not human, but not a monster either. It had eyes large and silver. Its skin was pale, its body thin. It wore a suit that looked broken parts, hanging loose wires, glowing red and blue. It stared at him for a long time. Then it spoke again, softly, weakly, like it had not used words in years. It said, "Mark, I need help," and then it fell to the floor. Mark did not run. He just stood there, the flashlight shaking in his hand, his heart pounding, his mind spinning. He had no answers, but he knew one thing for sure. The scratching under his floor was never rats. It was a call, and now he had answered it. Asterisk, the alien girl lay on the cold floor, unmoving. Mark slowly stepped forward, the flashlight still in his hand. The air inside the room felt heavy, like it had not moved in years. Dust floated around the metal walls. The lights blinked softly, like something old trying to wake up. He knelt beside her. She was breathing, but very weak. Her skin looked dry, almost cracked. Small wires were connected to a suit, but most of them were broken. Her hands were long and thin. Her fingers had no nails. Her face looked soft, not scary, not dangerous, just tired and lost. Mark touched her arm gently. Her eyes opened, slow and calm, and she looked right at him, not afraid, not angry. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. He leaned closer and heard her whisper again, one word, Help. He did not know what to say. He wanted to ask questions, but nothing came out. His mouth felt dry. He picked her up carefully. She was light like a child, her body cold like metal. He carried her back up the stairs, through the hatch and into his house. The floor still open behind him. He placed her on the couch, wrapped her in a blanket, and turned the heater on full blast. He made warm water and brought it in a small cup. She took only one sip and then closed her eyes again. Her body shivered, but her face was calm. Mark sat beside her, watching the door. Every sound outside made him jump. He locked all windows, checked the lights, and then returned to the couch. The house felt different now, not safe, not quiet, more like a secret waiting to be broken. After an hour she opened her eyes again. This time she sat up slowly and looked around, her head tilted like she was trying to understand where she was. She looked at the wooden walls, the fireplace, the photos on the shelf. She pointed at the fire and said warm, then smiled. Her voice was soft, like wind over snow, her words slow but clear. She looked at him and said name. He said Mark. She nodded, then placed her hand on her chest and said Rilla. Her name was Rilla, and she was not from Earth. She spoke with pauses, like learning each word. Again she told him she had been hiding here for many years, deep underground, inside a small escape chamber. Her ship had been attacked. Above Earth she escaped, but her pod crashed below this place hidden under his land. She said others came after her, bad ones, hunters from the stars. They wanted something she carried. Not gold, not weapons, but memory. Something inside her mind. Something locked, something dangerous. Mark asked why they wanted her. She said her brain held codes. Maps, old tech, lost tech, a path to something the hunters needed. She called it the vault. He asked what the vault was. She shook her head and said forbidden knowledge. Then she touched her suit and opened a small panel on her arm and side. It was a glowing shard like glass, but alive, moving with light and colors. She said, this is the key, and I am the lock. Mark sat still, his hands cold, his heart racing. He did not understand at all, but he knew this girl was not lying. Her eyes were too clear, her voice too real. He looked at the hatch still open on the floor. He asked, why now? Why the scratching? She looked down and said, my pod was breaking. I called out. He asked how she knew his name. She said, she learned it from his things, from his voice, from the radio he played at night. She said, I listened every day. I waited for help. Then a sound came from outside. Not wind, not a tree branch, a low hum like a machine waking up. Mark ran to the window and looked out in the sky above the forest. A red light moved between the trees, slow and quiet. Not a drone, not a plane, something else. He turned to Rilla and asked, are they here? She looked at the window and nodded, her eyes dark now, her voice shaking. She said, they found me. Mark closed the hatch, covered it with a floorboard, and grabbed his old rifle from the wall. He had never fired it at anything, but now his hands moved fast, his breath calm. He looked at her and asked, what do we do? She said, we hide or we run, but they do not stop. He looked at her again, then at the light outside, and said, then we fight. And she smiled. The red light outside moved slowly between the trees. Mark turned off every light inside the house. The room went dark, except for the soft glow from the fire. He looked at Rilla. She was sitting on the couch, her eyes fixed on the window, her hands gripping the blanket like she was waiting for something to strike. She said, they send scouts first, not to fight, but to listen, to find signals from my shard. They know I am awake now. They know I am not alone. Mark asked, how many will come? She said, maybe 3, maybe 5. Not many, but enough to kill, enough to search, burn, and leave no trace. He asked if they were like her. She shook her head and said, no, they are born to hunt. They smell fear and follow sound. They do not ask, they do not speak. They only take. Mark walked to the basement and came back with old motion lights and batteries. He had used them during snowstorms to keep animals away from the door. He set them up around the cabin facing the woods. If anything moved, the lights would flash. He gave Rilla a jacket and boots from his closet. They were too big for her, but she did not complain. She followed him outside into the cold night. They moved silently through the trees, placing lights and marking paths back to the house. Her eyes scanned the sky often. She whispered warnings every few steps. Do not breathe too loud, do not stare into the dark, and do not call my name after setting the last light. They walked back to the cabin. A strange noise echoed behind them, not close, not far, just strange, like metal dragging on stone. Rilla stopped and turned her head slowly, her voice low and sharp. She said, they are near. Mark saw her hand reach into her broken suit and pull out a small silver disc. It opened like a flower glowing blue. She pressed it against the door frame of the cabin. It made a soft hum and faded from sight. She said, it hides heat and sound for a while, not forever. Inside the house they sat by the fire. She opened the disc again. This time a small map appeared. Above it, glowing in the air, it showed the land around them, and small red marks blinking in the trees, moving closer, one by one. Mark Asked why they wanted her so badly, she looked at him and said, I hold their failure. I am the last memory of a mission. They tried to erase, if I live the truth lives, and their secret dies. He asked what secret. She said the vault is not a weapon. It is a message from the first ones, a warning and a promise. If they open it with force, it burns worlds. If opened with truth, it heals many. They fear truth more than war. Suddenly, the map blinked fast, 3 red dots close to the cabin, one right outside the window. Mark grabbed his rifle and moved to the door. Rilla placed her hand on his shoulder and said, they are not afraid of guns. They know how to make machines sleep. They fear light. They fear sound, like music or voice. Mark grabbed his radio and turned the volume up. Full static filled the room. Then old songs played crackling and loud. Rilla placed the disc near the speaker and it spread the sound outside like a wave outside. The first motion light flashed. Something moved fast. Past the trees, long legs, thin arms, no face, just a dark shape slipping through shadows. The second light flashed, then the third, then nothing. The radio went quiet, the disc dimmed, the fire cracked, and the front door shook once, then silence. Mark stepped back, rifle ready. Rilla stood near the window, not moving. She whispered, they are listening, not for us, but for what I carried. The house trembled slightly, a pressure in the air like a storm building, but no wind, no rain, just stillness. Then a voice spoke from the walls, not from the door, not from a person, but from the wires in the house. It said, return the carrier, return the shard, and live. Mark shouted, go to hell, and the voice answered, we do not know that place, but we will make one here. Suddenly, the fire blew out, the lights burst, the cabin went dark. Mark turned and saw Rilla glowing, her shard alive in her chest, blue light spreading through her skin, her eyes pure white, her voice deep and layered with many echoes. She said, no more hiding, no. Front door exploded inward and 3 figures rushed in, tall, fast, with armor like black glass, but before they could strike, a wall of light pushed them back. Rilla stood between them and Mark, her arms wide, her shard shining like a star. She screamed in a voice that shook the ground. This house is mine, this world is mine. The hunters fell back, hissing, not in pain but in surprise. They had not expected power, not from a lost girl, not from a human house. They vanished into smoke, leaving the door open, the cold air rushing in. Mark looked at Rilla, her body shaking, her eyes dim, her voice weak again. She said, they will return stronger, faster. Next time they will not ask. Asterisk. The cabin door was broken, pieces of wood scattered across the snow. Mark closed it with a table and pushed a shelf in front. The cold wind still found its way inside, but for now it was quiet. Rilla sat on the couch, her body still glowing a little, her hands shaking, her breath slow. She had used too much power to fast. Mark brought her hot water and wrapped her in more blankets. She smiled at him weakly, but said nothing, her eyes heavy, her body tired like her fire was fading. He sat beside her, holding the rifle, listening for any sound outside. Nothing came, not even the trees moved. It felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. She finally spoke, her voice soft. They did not expect me to fight. I was supposed to be broken, lost, easy to take. Mark said, not anymore, and she gave a small laugh, but her face turned serious, and she said, they will not stop. They will return with more, and they will not come through the door next time. They will come from above. He asked, what do you mean from above? And she said, from the sky, from orbit. Their ship waits, they're hidden, watching, and now it knows. I am awake now, it knows you helped me. He stood up and started gathering tools, batteries, wires, anything he could use. The cabin was no bunker, but he would not sit and wait to be taken. He remembered an old radio jammer. He once built 4 storms to stop interference. Maybe it could help. Rilla pulled a small cube from her suit. It glowed and floated in the air, spinning slowly. She said, this can make a shield for a short time, but only once. If we are lucky, it will hold them long enough for us to escape. He asked, escape to where? And she said, anywhere, not here. The sky, the stars, anywhere not under their eyes. Stood and walked to the hatch in the floor. She looked down and said, my pod is below, broken, but maybe not dead. It fell deep, but the systems might still hear me. They climbed down into the metal tunnel again, past the dust, past the quiet air, and reached a large round room half full of old machines. Lights blinked faintly on the walls. Her pod was there, a cracked silver shell with dark lines, and one broken window. Rilla touched the side and whispered something. The pod lit up inside, slow and dim, but alive. A voice spoke back, not human, but soft. It said, code accepted, pilot linked, welcome back. Mark stared as the pod shifted gears, opened panels, and started humming. The walls glowed with soft light. The screen showed a map of the land, and above it, a red dot moving fast toward them from the sky. She said, they come now, 1 ship to dropships. Maybe more, no time to run, but time to fly. Mark asked, can it fly? She said, maybe, but not far, maybe just enough, maybe just high enough. He said, then we do it. They ran back up the stairs. Rilla stayed behind to wake the engines. He grabbed bags, food, tools, her shard case, and one old photo of his parents, then rushed back down the hatch. The floor still open, the cabin full of snow now. The pod doors opened wide. Inside it was small, made for one, but now two would have to fit. She climbed in and waved him forward. He followed, closing the doors behind inside. The pod was tight, screens blinked, wires moved around them. The air smelled like copper and dust. Her hands flew over the panel, and the pod began to shake outside. A loud sound cracked the sky like thunder. Mixed with metal, the dropships were landing trees. Falling birds, flying in panic. Looked at the screen, red dots all around the cabin. 10 maybe. More. He saw one ship above firing something bright at the house. The roof vanished in flame. The fire spread, but the pod was sealed below, untouched then. The floor above them collapsed. The fire rushed down, but the pod burst upward through it. The engines roaring, the air full of smoke and light. The pod flew into the night sky, fast straight through the flames into the clouds. Mark held tight as everything shook. The stars above came closer. The forest below turned into dark shapes and tiny lights. Rilla screamed directions in her alien tongue, her hands on every button. The pod dodged lasers and smoke trails. Bright red lights trying to catch them, but the pod spun left and climbed higher. One enemy ship followed it, shot a beam that grazed the side. Mark felt the heat, saw the sparks. The pod groaned, but did not stop. Rilla shouted, one more burst, one more push. The engine screamed, and the pod jumped higher like it had been waiting to fly. Then silenced. The enemy ship turned back. The sky turned black and full of stars. The earth below, small and far. Mark looked at her, her face full of sweat, her hands still glowing, her body leaning forward like she was holding the stars in place. She turned to him and said, we are not safe, but we are not theirs. He nodded, breathing hard, his heart still racing. The pod drifted, now calm. No more red lights, no more hunters. Mark closed his eyes for a moment and said, then what? No. She looked ahead and said, now we find the vault. The stars outside the pod looked calm, but Rilla did not look calm. Her hands moved fast across the panel, her eyes full of light. The map on the screen showed their path through low orbit. 2 red signals followed close behind. One was fading, but the other stayed strong. Mark sat beside her, his body shaking from the launch, his hands gripping the seat he had never left. Earth before, never thought he would be flying in a broken alien ship, next to a girl from another world. He asked, where is the vault? She pointed to a blue dot, far away deep in black space, and said, not a place, not a station. It moves, always changes, but the shard knows. The way he looked at her and asked, why does it matter what is in the vault that makes them chase us? She touched her chest where the shard was hidden and said, the truth. The truth they buried long ago, the truth that can end them. He asked again, what truth? She stayed quiet for a moment, then spoke slow and low. I was born from a program made by the first worlds. They wanted peace, but others wanted power. I was made to carry memory maps, records, proof that the peace was real, that the war was fake. Mark stared at her, the light from the panel glowing on her face. Her skin looked almost clear, like glass, like something was moving inside. Not blood, not wires, but something else. Small lights, lines, codes. See, said the shard, is not just a map. It is a living record. It links to the vault, but it also changes the one who holds it. They put it inside me, not just to protect it, but to hide it, and now it has become part of me. Mark asked, what does it do to you? She said, it keeps me alive, even when my body breaks. It speaks to me. Sometimes shows me things, memories not mine, dreams from other times. Sometimes it hurts, sometimes it burns. She looked away for a second, then said, I do not know how much longer I can hold it. The shard grows, the more danger comes. The more it awakens, and if it wakes too fast, it might burn me from inside. Mark felt his chest tighten. He had seen her glow. He had seen her stand between the hunters and survive fire and power, but now he saw something else. Fear not, fear of them, but fear of herself, he said. Then we take it out, we find someone who can remove it. She shook her head fast. No one can touch it, not without losing themselves. It is not a tool, it is a test. If I die, it dies. If I give it up, it turns to dust. She placed her hand over her heart and said, I was born for this one task, but now I do not want to die for it. Not alone. Mark looked at her for a long moment, then said, you are not alone, not anymore, not as long as I breathe. She gave him a long look, her eyes soft, then said, the hunters know what I carry, and soon others will come, not just hunters, but your kind too. They watch from shadows, they listen to stars, and now they know something escaped Earth, something with value. Mark turned to the screen and saw a new signal appear, green, this time not red, not hostile, but close, a human code signal from an old orbital station long left behind. He asked, is that safe? She said no, but maybe useful for pod. Turned toward the station, drifting slowly, lights blinking from its side. Old letters in human language broken and faded. It was once a science post. Now it looked more like a tombrilla. Said they used this place long ago to study space doors and lost tech, maybe. They kept records. Maybe someone left clues about the vault or the shard or what. They landed in silence. The pod connecting to the side of the station. The door opened with a soft hiss. Mark grabbed a light and stepped inside metal walls, cold and wet from frozen air, dust everywhere. No sound, just silence, like the place had been waiting. They moved through the halls, slow and careful. Ryla touching the walls, the shard in her chest glowing brighter as they walked. It responded to something ahead then. They found it a room full of broken screens and databanks, some still blinking, barely alive. Ryla placed her hand on one, and the screen turned blue, then white, then showed symbols spinning fast. She said, "It remembers me, or something like me. It holds echoes." Screen showed images not clear, but sharp enough. Humans, standing with beings like Rilla, old ones, first ones, maps, stars. Vault doors opened, not with weapons, but with songs, with code, made from light and trust. Then one last image, the shard itself, floating above a planet, and around it, a warning, not in words, but in pulse and color. If taken by force, it burns. If awakened with fear, it breaks. If fused with hate, it kills. Mark turned to her and said, "You are more than a message. You are the last hope of something bigger." She nodded slowly, and said, "Then I must not fail." Asterisk. The old space station floated in silence, its lights blinking slow like a heartbeat fading. Mark stood near the window watching. Earth far below, so close, and yet already feeling like another world. He once knew the station creaked sometimes, as if it was dreaming of the Pastrilla. Sat in front of the main console, the shard inside her glowing brighter than ever. The map on the screen changed. Now it showed not one path, but many paths, each one dangerous, each one leading away from Earth, into deep space, into the unknown. She said, "They will come for us soon. They know I connected to this station. They know what signals I sent. They know where we are and how to find us." Mark asked, "How much time do we have?" She said, "Minutes, maybe 1 hour, if they are slow, but they are never slow." He asked if the pod could fly again. She shook her head. "The engines are burned. The energy used. The shard kept us alive, but not forever. The pod is now a shell." He looked at the map and saw something flashing nearby, another signal moving fast toward the station, not red, not green, something new, something marked as unknown. Ryla touched the console and tried to track the signal, but it kept jumping like it was hiding. She said, "This is not one of them. This is not human either. It is something else, something watching from far for long." Then a voice came through the station speaker. Low, soft, not like the hunters, not like humans. It spoke in waves and pulses, not in words, but in meaning. It said, "We saw you. We remember you. We offer passage." Ryla stood up, her eyes wide, her voice shaking. She said, "This cannot be real. They are gone. The old ones are gone. This must be a trick." The voice answered again, "We are not gone. We wait. We watch. We protect the last memory." Mark asked, "Protect? Who? Protect what?" The voice said, "Protect the carrier. Protect the shard. Protect the truth." New door opened inside the station, not one built by humans. Not one marked on any map. It opened with light, not metal, a tunnel made of sound and Ryla stepped forward slowly, the shard inside her pulling her toward the door, her hands shaking, her breath fast. She said, "I feel them. I feel peace and fear. Together they are not like the hunters. They are not like me." Mark walked beside her and asked, "Do we trust them?" She looked at him and said, "Do we have another path?" They walked into the tunnel together, the sound around them like singing without words, the light soft and warm, their steps light, like walking through mist. At the end of the tunnel they found a new ship, but it did not look like a ship. It looked like a bubble of stars, a living thing shaped by thought. It opened like a flower. When Ryla touched it, it welcomed her. Without words, the voice came again. "This is not a trap. This is your escape, your passage, your test." They stepped inside. The light closed around them, and the ship lifted without fire, without sound. It passed through the station like wind through trees and vanished into black space. Inside the ship they saw images around them, not windows, but memories, stars being born, planets falling apart, voices speaking across time and space, warnings, gifts, dreams. Ryla placed her hand on a glowing circle in front of them, and the ship answered it. Showed her the vault, a place hidden in dark space, not near stars, not near planets, a place lost and guarded by silence. Mark asked, "What is waiting there?" She said, "Maybe truth, maybe danger, maybe the end of this chase." The ship moved fast, stars blurred around them, time bent in ways Mark could not understand. He felt tired, but not sleepy, awake, but not thinking. The ship was carrying them through something deeper than space. Then it stopped. The images froze. The voice returned. "You are not alone, but you must choose. Do you want to open the vault or leave it close?" Ryla turned To Mark, her face pale, her hands shaking, she said, "This is not my choice alone, not anymore. I carried the shard, but you carried me, you found me, you helped me, now the vault waits for both of us." Mark looked at her, then looked at the dark ahead and said, "Then we open it together." The ship moved again, slower now, toward a dark sphere floating in nothing, no stars. No light, just space so empty it felt heavy. The voice said, "Once opened, it cannot be closed. Once known, it cannot be forgotten. Once awakened, it must be." And Drilla placed both hands on the circle in front of her. Mark did the same. The shard glowed like fire, then melted into the ship, into the dark, into the deep. The vault opened. The vault did not open with sound, it opened with silence. Space itself seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Light poured out from the dark sphere, not bright, but deep like a memory, glowing in a dream. Mark stood beside Ryla, inside the living ship, watching the light stretch across the stars, like fingers reaching for something. Ryla stepped forward, her hands no longer shaking. The shard inside her had melted into the ship, but something still glowed beneath her skin. Lines of light, moving like rivers. She said, "The vault sees us, it knows we came without war, without lies." Mark asked what is inside, and she said, "Not treasure, not weapons, but answers, the first answers to questions we forgot how to ask." The light wrapped around the ship, not pulling it, not pushing it, just inviting it. The walls of the vault opened like pages of a book, each page filled with stars, each word made of images from long ago. They saw the first ones, not gods, not monsters, but beings of thought and shape. Builders of peace, watchers of time. They made the shard, they made the vault, not to rule, but to remind. They saw a war, not between races, but between ideas, peace versus power, truth versus fear. The first ones chose to hide their truth, to protect it, to save it for a time when someone brave enough would come. Without fire, the ship moved forward, floating through scenes made of memory. Mark saw planets being born, and planets breaking apart, not by war but by mistakes. He saw beings reaching out to help each other, and others turning away. Out of Firla touched a beam of light, and it became a door. They walked through it, and found a room not made of walls, but of feeling, a space where thought became shape, a place where the shard had always belonged. A voice came again, not from the ship, not from the vault, but from inside their own thoughts. It said, "You have come not to take, but to understand, not to claim, but to carry forward." Rilla's skin glowed brighter. She looked at Mark, her face calm, her eyes full of stars. She said, "It is giving me something, not more power, not control, but memory. It is filling the space." The shard left with truth. Mark said, "What truth?" And she said, "The map was never about location, it was about connection. The path is not between stars, but between minds, between hearts, between choices." He asked, "What now?" And the voice answered, "The vault will close, the truth will live in those who touched it. You may return or stay, but you cannot forget." The ship turned slowly, the vault behind them closing like a flower at night. The light faded, but not completely. A small thread of it stayed inside Rilla, glowing gently under her skin. They did not speak for a long time. The ship carried them through quiet space, not fast, not slow, just steady, as if letting them rest. Mark sat beside her, his hand in hers, her hand warmer, now alive with purpose. He said, "I never thought a sound under my floor would lead to this." She smiled and said, "I never thought a stranger would become my shield." The ship brought them to a new place, not Earth, not a known world, but a station in orbit full of peace. Signals, no weapons, no alarms. Just light and green open fields, made inside steel walls. The group of beings waited, not just aliens, not just humans, but many kinds, all watching, all silent, then smiling as the ship opened. Drilla stepped out first, her body still glowing a little, her voice clear. She said, "I carry the vault. I carry the memory, and I choose to share it." Mark followed her, his boots touching the metal floor for the first time in days. He looked around and saw something he never expected, not fear, not control, but hope. One human stepped forward and said, "We thought you were lost. The hunters told us you." Drilla said, "Lies cannot last forever. Truth finds its way, even through walls, even through fear." Mark looked at the stars outside the glass wall and said, "And sometimes truth starts with a noise beneath the floor." They gave the memory to all, not by force, not by demand, but by light shared like a story passed in firelight. Each mind touched, each heart opened. The hunters vanished over time, their power lost without secrets to guard, and the vault became legend. Not a place, but a promise that truth can wait and truth can survive. Mark stayed with Rilla, not because of duty, not because of fate, but because no part of him could ever walk away from the girl who whispered his name from the dark hand. Rilla stayed with him, because somewhere between silence and stars he became more than a stranger. He became her answer.